Thanks so much, Susan and Johanna and everybody else for helping walk us through this very, very important webinar, which is the first webinar to directly follow up on a set of requests from various union members at the CEB level on how to start shifting sort of strategically by using the power or creating power out of their governing bodies. We know that all of us have different shapes and sizes of governing bodies, but no one is without a master. And so as we try to deal with them in our own ways, we can try to see if there is a set of strategies that as UNIN, we can adopt, adapt, and learn from to help our governing bodies help us move more quickly. And I wanted to open just with a reflection on two pieces of governing body work that I've been part of, while giving a nod, obviously, to UNFPA, who regularly engages their governing bodies on a variety of levels, WFP and others. But in the UNICEF space, about 4 years ago, actually, when I had first met Rob Opp, I think professionally, was when we started to have the joint meeting of the boards, which was our attempt as UNICEF, WFP, UNFPA, UN Women, two others, to get our boards, our joint board, together around the idea of innovation. And I remember sitting around with colleagues as we were trying to prepare our executive directors and to prepare the whole show. And Tony Lake had been very clear that from the UNICEF side, he wanted something dynamic and bold and revolutionary as we would engage our governing bodies. And he's particularly wanted us to talk about failure. And I've mentioned this before on other webinars, but it's still an anecdote that sticks with me. We sat around and there were, I don't know, 6 or 8 of us talking about our respective agencies. And I said, well, Tony really wants us to talk about failure and this is what we would present and so on. And one of the other agencies, unnamed, representative said, well, Chris, that's really not fair because UNICEF has much better failures than anybody else. Which was one of the 2 interesting anecdotes from that. The webinar, the joint meeting of the boards went off quite well, in fact, and we did talk about failure. We had some live polling and engagement from the board members in the audience. And this was in 2014, so this was still fairly new for all of us. But one of the interesting things that happened was one of our board members raised their hand, and we thought we had prepped their team and everything. And their comment at the end of all of this was, well, you know, that makes a lot of sense. I hear what you're saying, but for our country, failure is not an option. And you can't talk about, you know, this is very difficult for us to even hear. And sort of all of the air went out of the room. And we hadn't done enough, I think, at that point to really engage before, to understand some of the nuances, but also to make the point in a variety of different channels to this particular board member who, in retrospect, one would assume would feel this way. But nonetheless, we were able to use the whole dialogue and the data from that to establish a side document, which we referred to over the next 2 years, which fed into UNICEF's strategic plan. And we kind of used that as context, which has helped us immensely. So even that fairly grueling experience was for us an entryway and a window into a lot of other conversations. And we noticed the same with our special session that we had recently. We will have somebody from UNICEF from our executive board team, Hai Kyung, who will be talking a little bit about our recent work. But I think that, Susan, if that's all right, that would be my opening. And again, thank you everybody, morning, afternoon, and evening for being on this webinar. And we really look forward to the discussion over the next hour and a half.